when time was measured in millennia. The clay tablet was small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, yet heavy, its weight not just in baked earth, but in the gravity of the story it carried. The cuneiform signs pressed into its surface were over 4,000 years old, but the tale they told claimed to stretch far beyond that, into a time when kings did not just reign for decades, but for thousands of years. This was the Sumerian King's List, a document so strange that it blurs the boundary between historical record and cosmic myth. Discovered in fragments scattered across Mesopotamia, its earliest surviving copy rests quietly in the vaults of the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, far from the dusty plains where it was born. At first glance, it seems straightforward, an account of rulers, their cities, and the lengths of their reigns. But look closer, and you'll see something that shakes the foundations of history. The first 8 kings listed ruled for an impossible span of time. Not 50 years, not 100, but tens of thousands. One king, Alulim of Eridu, is said to have ruled for 28,800 years. Another, Alalgar, reigned for 36,000 years. And these are not isolated cases. Every ruler in this early section is credited with lifespans that defy logic, stretching into the realm of the supernatural. Why would the scribes of ancient Sumer, a people so meticulous in their records of trade and law, fabricate such numbers? Were these symbolic, meant to represent divine favor or cosmic cycles? Or are we looking at a fragment of a reality that has been buried under millennia of forgetfulness? According to the tablet, after these long reigning monarchs, a cataclysm swept the land. The text simply says, "Then the flood swept over." A sudden matter-of-fact line that bridges an age of godlike kings to the world we recognize today. But what kind of flood could erase thousands of years of history? And why does this echo so closely with flood stories from other ancient cultures, from the biblical Noah to the Akkadian Utnapishtim? The Sumerian King's List doesn't answer these questions directly. It simply moves on, listing post-flood kings whose reigns are more reasonable, at least by human standards. Yet even here, there are oddities. Dynasties that rise and vanish abruptly. Rulers who appear in one city only for power to inexplicably shift to another without war or rebellion recorded. Archaeologists have long debated its meaning. Some insist it's pure myth, a way for Sumerian rulers to legitimize their authority by linking themselves to divine ancestors. Others suspect that hidden in these exaggerated numbers might be traces of real events, perhaps an advanced civilization predating Sumer itself, remembered dimly through the ages. But here's the strangest part. The King's List isn't just a single tablet. Versions of it have been found in different cities, from Nippur to Ur, and though the wording changes, the structure remains, eerily consistent. Even more curious, fragments of a similar tradition appear in neighboring cultures, as though everyone in the ancient Near East was whispering a shared secret. If that's true, then what we're holding isn't just a Sumerian artifact. It's a key to a story that spans continents and perhaps even civilizations lost to time. And so the question remains, were these thousand-year kings the creations of mythmakers, or the last echoes of an era we can no longer fully imagine? In the next part, we'll follow the trail into the earliest Sumerian city named on the list, Eridu, a place the ancients called the first city, where heaven and earth were said to meet. The kings who ruled before the flood. They say history is written by the victors, but what if the victors were gods? What if the ancient scribes didn't record battles and laws, but memories of beings who walked the earth for tens of thousands of years? The Sumerian King List does not begin with kings as we imagine them, mortal men crowned in gold. It begins with the words, "After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu." Already the tone is set. The first city of kings was not chosen by the people, but by divine decree. Eridu, long considered by archaeologists as one of the earliest urban centers, was, according to this list, the cradle of a kingship that wasn't entirely human. The records state that the very first ruler, Alulim, reigned for an impossible 28,800 years. Not decades, not centuries, millennia upon millennia. His successor, Alalgar, ruled for 36,000 years. The list continues in this way, naming 8 antediluvian kings before the Great Flood, whose combined reigns total an astonishing 241,200 years. To modern historians, this is absurd. Even the longest-lived humans could never dream of such lifespans. And yet, nearly every ancient culture has stories of godlike ancestors who lived in an age before the deluge. The Bible speaks of Methuselah living for 969 years. Egyptian records hint at dynasties of god-kings ruling for thousands. The Mayans tell of the first people, blessed with knowledge and life far beyond our own. What's more unsettling is that the Sumerians didn't present these reigns as myth or poetry. They recorded them with the same matter-of-fact tone they used for later, historically verifiable kings. It's as if, to them, there was no distinction. Some researchers argue this is simply symbolic, a reflection of importance, not literal years. Others, however, entertain a far stranger possibility, that the rulers of early Sumer were not entirely of this world. And here's where it gets even more mysterious. The King List clearly divides time into 2 distinct eras, before the flood and after. The flood wasn't just a disaster, it was a reset. After it, the reigns became shorter, more human, as if some cosmic force had clipped the wings of kingship itself. But why? Would the Sumerians, master record keepers, insist on numbers so absurdly large? Were they pointing us toward a forgotten truth, or deliberately hiding something in plain sight? The first kingdom falls, yet continues. Imagine this, an empire so vast, so enduring, that its first collapse was not the end, but merely an intermission in a saga spanning millennia. The Sumerian King List records the rise and fall of cities with the same casual certainty it uses to describe kings who ruled for entire epochs. One such city was Kish, said to have taken the mantle of kingship after the Great Flood. Here, the records speak of Etana, the shepherd who ascended to heaven and consolidated all the foreign lands. Etana is more than just a name. He's a figure wrapped in myth. Sumerian tablets describe his journey to the heavens on the back of a great eagle, searching for a plant of birth to grant him a son. Was this an early allegory for divine right to rule, or an ancient memory of something far stranger? The kings of Kish ruled for hundreds of years each, their reigns flowing into one another like the slow drift of continents. Then, abruptly, the balance shifted again. The list states, Kish fell, and the kingship was carried to Uruk. Uruk, one of the earliest true cities in human history, enters the list not with ordinary kings, but with legends like Enmerkar and Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, the hero king, is granted 126 years on the throne. Not thousands, but still far beyond human norms. His epic, carved in cuneiform, tells of quests for immortality and battles with creatures not of this world. The strange part? Archaeologists have found walls and ruins in Uruk that match descriptions from the Gilgamesh stories, hinting that myth and reality may have shared the same soil. But this is where the king list's quiet strangeness deepens. As dynasties shifted, Uruk to Ur, Ur to Awan, each transfer of power is told without context. No wars, no revolts, no betrayals, just a mysterious declaration: the city fell. The kingship was taken to, and in this near-biblical cadence, history and legend blur until it's impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. And then comes the most unnerving pattern of all. Whenever a city falls, the incoming kings seem to inherit not just the throne, but the impossible lifespans. Why would reign lengths stretch beyond the human span in one city after another? Could it be an ancient calendrical misunderstanding? A symbolic exaggeration? Or were the Sumerians preserving an older truth about beings who were not entirely human? In the centuries that followed, one city would rise to hold a secret so strange it would echo through the very roots of Mesopotamian myth. And that city was Shuruppak. As the centuries rolled forward in the text, the kings grew fewer in number, but their reigns still defied reason. One ruled for 28,800 years, another for 21,000. Some were said to have been both mortal and divine, a contradiction that seems designed to challenge our understanding of reality itself. Then, a sudden shift. The King's List moves from impossibly long reigns to more human time spans. Decades, years, sometimes even months. But this transition is framed by a pivotal phrase: then the flood swept over. This wasn't just any flood. Many historians believe it's the same great deluge described in Mesopotamian myths, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, and even the biblical account of Noah. Could the King's List be a rare written bridge connecting mythological flood legends to real events in ancient history? Some scholars theorize that before this flood, the list preserved memories of a pre-cataclysm civilization, possibly advanced in ways we no longer understand. After the flood, however, the rulers became mortal. Their reigns shortened, their powers diminished. Was this a poetic way to say humanity had been reset? The stone tablet's surviving lines also contain abrupt gaps, missing names, half-finished inscriptions, and strange symbols where royal titles should be. Were these eroded by time, or deliberately removed to conceal something? In the back rooms of museums and private collections, whispers persist of other fragments of the King's List, ones never shown to the public, that hint at cities which no archaeological dig has yet found, and rulers whose existence would rewrite the timeline of human history. And if those fragments exist, someone, somewhere, is keeping them hidden. Beneath the relentless sun of Mesopotamia, the ruins whispered stories only the wind seemed to understand. But among the broken walls and crumbling temples, there was one artifact that scholars approached with a mixture of awe and unease. A weathered obsidian tablet stored deep within the archives of Baghdad before vanishing without explanation during a chaotic year of conflict. Those who had examined it before its disappearance claimed it was not a mere copy of the Sumerian King's List. It was older. The engravings were crude, almost primitive, as if carved by a hand that had never seen the refinement of later Sumerian craftsmanship. Yet, in its rough lines, it carried names, kings, that had never appeared in any other known record. One of them was said to have ruled for 34,621 years. Another for 29,000 and change. The numbers were not just impossible, they were unnervingly precise, as though they were copied from a record so ancient that the people themselves had forgotten its origin. The deeper the researchers looked, the more they stumbled across another strange pattern. The tablet's list wasn't merely chronological. It seemed to align with something far more cosmic. The slow wobble of Earth's axis, known as the precession of the equinoxes. If this was true, then the reigns of these mythical kings weren't just exaggerated. They were celestial, markers, aligned with grand astronomical cycles spanning tens of thousands of years. And that begged the question, were the Sumerians recording history, or mapping something far older than human civilization itself? In the quiet of the museum's storage room, the black stone had been just another relic on a dusty shelf. But the moment it vanished, rumors bloomed like wildfire. Whispers of private collectors, secret vaults, and even governments desperate to hide evidence of a timeline that would tear apart our understanding of human origins. One archaeologist who had studied the artifact claimed in an interview, "The King's List is not history. It's a key. And when you know what it unlocks, you understand why so much of our past is missing." But what could such a key possibly open? A lost archive? A hidden chamber? Or something not of this earth? The next clue would come not from Iraq, but from an unlikely place. The frozen mountains of eastern Turkey, where an equally baffling inscription would link these rulers to a cataclysm the world has all but forgotten. And it was there that the line between myth and truth would become dangerously thin. The more scholars study the Sumerian King List, the more it seems to function like a mirror, reflecting not only the past, but also the intentions of those who recorded it. Perhaps it was never meant to be a history book in our modern sense. Perhaps it was a political tool, a divine genealogy meant to legitimize those in power by weaving them into the cosmic order. The notion of kings ruling for tens of thousands of years may not have been meant literally, but symbolically, communicating power, stability, and a connection to forces beyond mortal comprehension. In a society where the gods were deeply intertwined with daily life, to link a ruler directly to divine time was to place them beyond challenge. And yet, what if even the symbolism hides fragments of truth? Could there have been a period so distant, so alien to our current understanding, that lifespans, environments, and human biology operated on entirely different rules? It is an unsettling question, one that sits between archaeology and mythology, neither fully answerable nor fully ignorable. Over time, the King List became less about impossible reign lengths and more about the steady, earthly reality of human kingship. By the final entries, reigns resemble those of known history, a few decades, perhaps less. The gods recede into the background. The floods are no longer spoken of, and humanity takes its place as sole keeper of the throne. Still, the earliest names remain, ghostly and defiant, challenging us to imagine worlds before our own. Were these kings flesh and blood, or simply eternal ideas carved into clay? As the sun sets over the ruins of ancient Sumer, one thing is certain. The Sumerian King List stands as one of humanity's oldest puzzles, a thread connecting the cradle of civilization to a realm of timeless mystery, a reminder that sometimes the past refuses to be fully known, and perhaps that is its greatest power. And so, the Sumerian King List remains both a map and a mirror, a map of a world we think we know, and a mirror reflecting our own hunger for answers. For every cracked tablet, every deciphered line, the shadow of the unknown only grows longer. Perhaps the kings of old truly ruled for millennia, standing as guardians of some forgotten covenant. Or perhaps the numbers are a riddle, meant to outlast the rise and fall of empires. Somewhere, in a sealed chamber or a buried vault, the missing pieces may still wait. Fragments of a story older than history itself. And when they are found, they may not just rewrite the past, they may redefine the future.